Man, remember how much fun we had pretending that we could have a computer the size of a notebook? Yeah, me too.
And welcome back to the heart of the stories we tell. I'm Rob, the host, and this is another look deep into what makes a story, a theory on storytelling by a storyteller who believes that every story has merit. And tonight's episode is.
Sci-fi getting things wrong. Now wait, I know what you're going to say. Doesn't sci-fi get a whole bunch of things right? In fact, didn't you say that some of your favorite series are sci-fi ones? Well, yes, they are. And they do get a lot right. But there are certain things that just come up time and time again that they get wrong. And the funny thing is we give them credit for getting them right when we probably shouldn't. We're going to do a whole thing about how Star Trek, for all of their getting right, gets so much wrong, too. And of course, because we've been talking Orville all year, we'll talk about that, too. Batman is one of those ones, though, that I want to start with. And I want you to look at this. In one of the movies, they justify it by saying, oh, well, we could outfit the whole army with them, but $1 million is too much for some grunt's life. And maybe that's too realistic for me. Some bean counter somewhere in Washington saying, nope, that's literally not worth saving a soldier's life. A soldier's life is worth less than that. And Batman has a whole bunch of things. I mean, his computer alone, is it a bank of cray? Is it some sci-fi thing? Who knows? It depends on the telling. But he's not exactly sci-fi. So, mostly what we're going to be talking about is Sir Arthur Clarke's laws and something that he said. And I can't find an actual visual to go with it, but at the end of the day, I think you understand where I'm going with this. When someone says something's possible, he's almost always right. When someone says something's impossible, he's almost always wrong. And specifically, I want you to think about all the times people said something was right or wrong. Someone that said, hey, we can't have a watch communicator, that's ridiculous. Now we have iWatches. But the specifics matter, and the specifics are where we get it wrong. How far in the future is this? Well, let's take a look. But first, for those of you that don't know what I do here, I take apart stories and come up with ideas on how and why they work. And I do reviews of stories. If that sounds interesting, click the subscribe button, because we're going to unpack what I mean when I say the future isn't what we thought it would. So before we get into the Trek stuff, Avery Brooks did a commercial for, I think it was IBM, and he asked, where are my flying cars? I was promised in the year 2000 we would have flying cars. Well, yeah, where are they? The Jetsons have them, the Back to the Future series had them, and realistically, we probably could have them, but I wouldn't trust many people to fly them. And so why does that matter? Well, because when we talk about sci-fi, when we talk about fantasy, we're talking about imagining what could be. And when we do, when we say something is so outlandish, sometimes it proves to be true. And things that we all thought were absolutely going to happen didn't. And that's what I mean when I say sci-fi getting things wrong. And as I promised, we're going to start by talking about all the things that Star Trek got wrong. And we're going to do it by talking about things that they got right. You remember seeing these things on The Next Generation? Yeah, they don't look that much more advanced than an Apple iPad, do they? Or my Galaxy tablet that I record on sometimes. When we look at Star Trek, we see all this futuristic tech. And realistically, it's not that futuristic. This is supposed to be the 23rd century, the 24th century. Things by then, what should look like magic to us. Everything that we see today are things that in the 60s they thought would take place in the 20th century. The iPad, the communicator, the eyepieces. Heck, I wouldn't be surprised if we have a holodeck someday. Specifically, Star Trek IV has a scene that I want to talk about. No, not the one where Scotty invents something or talks to the computer through the mouse. But Kirk and his love interest are in a restaurant, and he gets a call on his communicator, and he flips it open and he talks, and it's such a wondrous, amazing thing. Now remember, they've traveled back in time to 1985. In 1985, cell phones were big bricks and couldn't communicate worth a damn. And at the same time, didn't have any voice recognition in them. All of that seemed like magic to them. But fast forward to today, and Kirk's communicator, you sit there and go, wait, all that can do is make a phone call? Really? You have to have a separate device in order to find out things and hook to your computer? I mean, my phone just streams everything. And my phone isn't even a really good one. In their defense, theirs is powerful enough to transmit directly to a satellite, and ours still look like bricks when now they're satellites to the Enterprise, but ours need towers to boost our signal up till there. But another thing is I want you to look at just in general the way their keyboards were in the original series, and even the way they are in Next Gen and in Voyager. Those things aren't really that much more advanced than our touchscreens. And again, it's not that they were, whoa, they totally didn't know what they were talking about. No, I mean, we invented technology to duplicate what we saw on Star Trek, and that's cool. We invented Bluetooth and Google Glass and who knows what else. But at the same time, we're not in the 23rd century. We're in the 21st century. We're at the beginning of it. And technology just keeps leapfrogging forward and forward and forward. I saw this video on Facebook about a translator. That's right, a universal translator. I put it in, and someone speaks French, and I hear them speaking English. Now, I think the example they gave was actually the reverse. The person saying they were hearing them in French, where they were speaking English. But I want you to think about that for a minute. The universal translator is Star Trek, Star Wars, Doctor Who, crazy sci-fi. And they just got it now. Imagine going back in time to yourself 20 years ago and trying to explain every bit of technology you have at your fingertips today to that person. I couldn't even do it. I mean, how do you explain that our phones can do what they can do, that our computers can do what they can do, that we have these pads, that the iWatch is a possibility, that all of these things aren't sci-fi anymore, they're science fact. And at the same time, we've had shows that do worse, ones that don't understand where the next leap's going to come from. Future post-apocalyptic world of Johnny Mnemonic talks about people who are carrying critical information inside their skulls so it can't be hacked. Now, in and of itself, that's still sci-fi. We can't plug in and download information into your head. No, whoa, I know Kung Fu. But realistically, it's not even close to the way things were, and here's why. You want to know how all those data transfers had to happen? They had to happen by hardwire. He had to plug in everywhere he went. Now, they got part of it right because they did have some virtual reality stuff in there, but even that virtual reality and plug and play just are kind of dead sciences. We've moved so far behind it. Everything works on Wi-Fi. And I would say I'm sure that Wi-Fi is going to continue, but that's not even taking into account the fact that who knows what the next big thing's going to be. I certainly don't. And I'm not even going to try to guess when I write my sci-fi. A great example of where this went wrong is a role-playing game that was similar to Johnny Mnemonic. It's called Shadowrun. And Shadowrun was supposed to be super sci-fi and super fantasy, except all of their stuff involved breaking into a place physically in order to hack their systems, which is a TV trope too. Oh, we need to get in there. Except for the fact that you don't. In the real world, the internet accesses just about everything. Now, I know what you're going to say, but they literally had to rewrite their rules and have a whole new system for the fact that Wi-Fi exists, because no one foresaw it when this game was written. Like Johnny Mnemonic before it. They just couldn't comprehend the idea of how far our technology was going to advance in our own lifetimes. Because these things are just, you never know what the next big turnaround is going to be. And sometimes people try to write horror, and sometimes they try to write scary, killer robots from the future. And you sit there and you look at them and you go, yeah, we already have scary killer robots right now. The Terminator doesn't seem so fearful now. It's a personification. Even this thing, I mean, we could build this thing. We did build these things, for God's sake. And at the same time, they have weaknesses. I mean, why put legs on your Terminator? Yeah, okay, if it's to infiltrate. But realistically, these things are easier to take down for it. Do you know what our giant killer robots look like right now? This is a Reaper drone. It will kill all of you dead in a second if they want to. Precision strike. And if you say, oh, well, that's not a giant robot. No, they built this thing. This thing's real. This is a real mech. for all intents and purposes. And again, we don't. This is for fun and sport and for pack loading. This is what they use to kill you, and that's not even going into hacking. Have you ever seen someone hack one of these things in a TV show? Do you do you know why these things are easy to hack? Because they use radio signals. They use Wi-Fi. In the real world, the greatest defense against hackers, though, is to not be hackable by using old school tech. That's why our nukes still run off key systems and floppy drives, so that no hacker can sit there and say, hey, I know how to do this. Then again, hacking's another thing sci-fi gets wrong all the time. I'll never forget the episode of Arrow where someone used an iPad to hack a bomb. Again, our nukes don't work that way. But having said that, not everyone gets that wrong. On an episode of Leverage, we had this great moment where Artisan, the team hacker that might as well have been using magic most of the time, just literally hacked into the government databases, got everyone's email address, and emailed them. And you know what? He just sent out. I mean, it was the beginning of running a political. They stole an election. Maybe that's too political and too on the nose. Let's talk about swordfish for a minute. Let's talk about the fact that, oh, we're going to create this whole magical worm that can't be defeated. Because again, somehow they think that there's a thing that, I don't know, one all-purpose hack that can hack anything. Dan Brown wrote a really great psychological thriller on it. And I did one of my Throwback Thursdays on it, where I talked about all the things that they got right and wrong about technology hacking, and it's really interesting. Or you could take a look at the way we do things in video games. There's a game called Watch Dogs. Now, I could run through everything they do right and everything they do wrong, but to be perfectly honest, it's a day after tomorrow future technology society anyway, and MatPat did an entire video on it, showing just how many things you can hack into, and I don't want to get into scary stuff. What I want to talk about is that all of this traces back to what I used for my quote for Arthur C. Clarke at the beginning. When you say something's impossible, you're almost always wrong. When you say something's possible, you're almost always right. Next time you sit down to enjoy a nice sci-fi series or book or TV show or even a cartoon, I want you to think about this. In the real world, you couldn't explain to someone from 1896 what the world was like in 1996 without sounding like you were crazy. You couldn't explain to someone in the year 1917 what last year was like without sounding like you were talking about some far-flung future. That's only 100 years. Let's go 50. 50 years ago is what, 1968? Yeah, 1968, because this will come out after the new year. Or on New Year's Eve, actually. Could you explain to someone in 1968 what was going on in the year 2017, crossing over? Or would you have to just default to, no, there are no flying cars? But hey, instead of flying cars, we have watches that can communicate to our phones that are better computers than we use to put people on the moon. And oh yeah, this would be considered a bulky tablet. I want you to think about that, because when we judge sci-fi, when we look at the technology, when we look at how society, what we're really looking at is a microcosm of our society today. What we hope, what we fear, what we want technology to be capable of, not what it is capable of. Because odds are we're always going to be wrong. Because for it to be believable, for someone to be able to put aside their suspension of disbelief, odds are they'll be wrong. Can you think of an example to counteract me? Or what do you just think in general of this? Let me know down in the comment section. I realize this was a bit of a weird one, but if you like it, we'll talk more on the Orville. For now, let's go for a like spike and see how many thumbs up I can get. And of course, click that subscribe button if you're new here. I'm trying to build up a community, and if I can build 100 subscribers, I'm going to give away an Amazon gift card during a special video that I do. For now, though, I'm going to just sit back and think about all the wonderful magical technology we're going to see in my lifetime, in my nephew's lifetime, in his children's lifetime. as I walk through the heart of the stories we tell. I hope you have a good night and a happy new year. May old acquaintance